Welcome back, guys, and thanks for checking out today's video. I am super excited because today is finally time to do the throttle body comparison test on this 2008 Honda Civic Si. Hopefully you guys have already had a chance to check out my previous video where I set this car up, got it all up and running with the new parts to do this test, the larger drive-by-wire throttle body, the ported intake manifold, and the RDX injectors. If you haven't had a chance to check out that video, go back and check out that video first and then watch this video. If you have checked it out, thanks for the view, and hopefully you guys are going to enjoy this video that I have for you today, where we're going to finally find out how much power the different size throttle bodies make on these 8th gen Civics. So guys, I get asked a lot, do larger throttle bodies make more power? And my answer is usually along the lines of it should, and it shouldn't hurt power, and that usually the best performing cars that I tune always have larger throttle bodies on them. So that being said, we are going to try to find out how power is affected with the various different size throttle bodies I have for testing today. One thing that I wanted to add was every time I get a chance to drive one of these cars or tune one of these cars that has a larger throttle body than stock, the one thing I immediately notice is how much quicker and how much faster the throttle response is. The larger throttle body really does improve the driver experience, and that's something that just can't be measured by the dyno. Whatever the results are today, if it makes power, if it doesn't make power, one thing I do want to say is the larger throttle body really does help improve drivability and the response of the engine, and that is just something that we can't measure with the dyno. All that being said, it is time to get started. The car is strapped down, ready to go. It is not tuned yet. It is not tuned for the parts that I put on it in the previous video, so what we need to do now is get the car up and running, get it up to temperature. I'm going to tune it and see how much power the car is making today, because I want to create a new benchmark for what this car is making today under these weather conditions with the mods that are on it, and we are going to be comparing this new benchmark and how much it makes to the various different size throttle bodies that we're going to be testing today. So some of you might be wondering why I have installed the largest throttle body, which is the K-Tune 72mm throttle body. The idea is that I'm going to do a top-down approach. This throttle body is the largest throttle body that I have for testing, and in theory, it should potentially make the most amount of power. So my idea is I will tune the car, see how much power it makes with this large throttle body, and then I'm going to start swapping on the smaller throttle bodies I have and see if those smaller throttle bodies rob the engine of any power. And then we should have a pretty good idea of the difference between the power levels of the different throttle bodies. I like this idea because it rules out a lot of the variables. We should be able to establish a pretty good benchmark with this throttle body, and if a smaller throttle body makes less power, it is technically not as good. So that being said, it is time for me to get this car up and running, get it tuned, and establish the new benchmark for today with the parts that are on the car. So why don't I get started? Alright guys, so the car is all tuned and we have established a new benchmark for what the car is making today with the weather conditions and all the new parts that have been swapped onto the car since all the prior tuning. So with the current mods that are on the car, the K-Tune 3.5-inch cold air intake, the K-Tune 72mm throttle body, the RBC intake manifold that was ported to match the opening of the 72mm drive-by-wire throttle body, and RDX injectors, the car is currently making today with the current weather conditions, it is making 218 and 161 foot-pounds of torque. After tuning, I did 2 back-to-back pulls within 1 minute of each other to make sure they are consistent and no variations or heat soak or whatnot is affecting the car, and they are basically identical back-to-back pulls. The car has made this much power before, 218 wheel horsepower, but that was back in the winter. That's almost like, I don't know, that was months ago when it was much cooler. So I think this is a good representation of what the car should be making today with the weather conditions. So the plan now is to swap in one of the other throttle bodies and see how the other throttle body affects power. So I have 3 other throttle bodies that we're going to test out today. I have a ZDX, basically 70mm throttle body, a J35 65mm throttle body, and then the original 60mm throttle body that came with the car. I'm going to start with the ZDX throttle body and see if there's any power difference between this and the 72mm K-Tune throttle body. I suspect there probably won't be any difference. They are so close in size. The only real difference though will be I have to install this adapter plate because the ZDX is the one throttle body that won't directly bolt onto the RBC intake manifold as is. The bolt pattern is slightly wider than all the other throttle bodies. So you do need, if you are gonna run a ZDX throttle body, you have to get something like this K-tuned adapter plate that allows you to bolt the throttle body to the RBC intake manifold. So I'm gonna install the adapter plate, install this throttle body, and do some pulls and see how much power the car makes with this throttle body. So let's take care of that and see what it makes. All right guys, so ZDX throttle body installed in place of the K-Tune 72mm throttle body. Like I said, this throttle body requires the adapter plate. So this is how it works out with the adapter plate bolted onto the intake manifold and to the throttle body. It does increase the plenum's volume technically. So technically, if this ends up making any more power, it might be possibly due to the increased plenum volume. Anyway, we're here to find out how this affects power, if it's gonna make the same, if it's gonna make less. So I'll get it up and running, get it warmed up to the right temperature, and we'll do 2 pulls and see how it performs. All right guys, so I did a couple pulls with the ZDX throttle body and I have the results up on the screen. So what I have up here is, in red, the results from the K-Tune throttle body, in blue and green, the results from the ZDX throttle body. Very similar results. You can kind of see though that the K-Tuned beat it in certain areas. It's so negligible, it's almost no different whatsoever. The 2 final results for the ZDX throttle body were 217 and 218, and then 161 and 160, so super close, not really surprised. The throttle bodies are almost exactly the same size, basically the same. The only difference is the packaging. The OEM style throttle body with the adapter plate versus the K-tuned one-piece unit that bolts on. That would realistically come down to personal preference, what you want in your engine bay. So with the ZDX results done and out of the way, it is time to move on to the J35 throttle body. And I am most interested to find out what the results are going to be with this throttle body because honestly, this is the throttle body that most guys run. It is super inexpensive. You can buy it brand new from the dealer for like less than $200, I believe. And it bolts right on. It's readily available. It's OEM quality. So I'm going to bolt this throttle body up next, and we are going to do some pulls with it and see what it ends up making with the J35 throttle body. So let's take care of that and see what it makes. All right guys, so I have the J35 throttle body all bolted up, ready to go. Like I said, I am eager to see how this throttle body performs because realistically, this is the throttle body that most guys get, and I tune a ton of these. So I'm curious to see the difference between this, the ZDX, and the K-tuned one. It's a nice piece. It bolts directly onto the RBC intake manifold with no need for an adapter or anything like that. The only thing is you are basically left with like 2 map sensors, which is kind of awkward, but either way, it's on, it's ready to go. I'm gonna get it up and running, stabilize the engine temperature, and we're gonna do 2 pulls and see how much it makes. All right, guys, 2 pulls done with the J35 throttle body, and I have the results up on the screen here. In red again is the K-tuned 72mm throttle body. In green and blue are the results from the 2 pulls that I did with the J35 throttle body, and it made slightly less, 216 versus the 218, same torque, and the power, the graph looks a little different. You can see the K-tuned one, largest one, made a little bit more peak power and a little bit more power right here, but there is a trade-off. The J35 ended up making a little bit more power in the I don't know, basically 45 to 5,000 RPM range. So interesting results. It changed the torque curve a little bit, but it lost a little bit of power up top by comparison. So we're not done with the J35 throttle body. It is time to install the original stock Civic Si throttle body. All right, so I have the last throttle body here is the stock original Civic Si throttle body, I believe at 60mm, and K-tune adapter for the intake. So I will go ahead and install this throttle body and get it up and running, and we'll do some pulls. All right, guys, so I got the original Civic Si 60mm throttle body back on, and it's time to get it up and running, stabilize the engine temperature again, and do some pulls and see how much power this original throttle body will make compared to the other ones. So why don't we get started and see how it does. All right, guys, all done. I did 2 pulls with the original stock SI throttle body, and I have the results up on the screen. Like before, in red, I have the K-tuned throttle body results, and in blue and green, I have the new Civic Si stock throttle body results. It did make a little bit less, 214 this time, and 160, 161 foot-pounds torque. So it did lose out a little bit up top in comparison to the larger throttle body. And again, it made a little bit more power in this mid-range, the 4.5 to 5,000 RPM, but it lost out in this other range, so a bit of a trade-off there. So there you have it, guys. Throttle body size will affect power, and this, keep in mind, this is on a completely internally stock K20 Z3 pump 91 gas. This is at the, call it the 215 to 220 horsepower range. Realistically, if there was a set of cams in this engine, such as like a set of drag cartel drop-in cams, I bet we would see a bigger gap between the throttle bodies, because as you make more power, you need more air, and the results would be more significant, or the differences would be more significant. So anyways, I think that's about it. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. It was fun to make, and it was interesting to see the results, although not crazy. There are definitely some differences between the throttle body size at this power level with these mods on the stock engine. So all that being said, hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you haven't already and you like these videos, do me a favor, hit subscribe, hit the like button if you like it, and I'll continue to keep making them. So thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you again soon. Bye now.